Our first presenter is a fraud claims law specialist and has worked in the insurance industry for 15 years. She is the lead claimant fraud investigator and the primary host of all new hire and annual anti-fraud trainings given to employees with the intent to spread the message about work comp fraud, educate personnel on detecting fraud, and how to mitigate claims when fraud is suspected. Our second presenter was a 2016 recipient of the National Healthcare Anti-Fraud Association's Investigation of the Year Award and has participated in over 30 criminal cases surrounding medical and legal providers attempting to defraud the workers' compensation system. His approach to insurance fraud investigation includes the merging of data science, software development, and project management methodologies aimed at wholly modernizing the fight against insurance fraud. I'd like to present to you SIU investigator Lindsay Beacom and SIU manager Christopher Dill.
Thanks, Gio. Really great to be back. And thanks from Lindsay and I to all the attendees across the country. We know that this is a really important topic, and we really relish the opportunity to speak to you about it. This is actually the second in our work comp fraud Spot It, Stop It series. In that first presentation, currently posted on ICWgroup.com, within that, it really solicited some feedback from the customers that affirmed the importance of this topic of work comp fraud and really helped us hone in on, well, what should the next version of the series be? This particular topic, employer level investigations, was specifically derived from that attendee feedback of that last customer webinar, and it's really wholly aligned with what we know to be an absolute truth. Fraud fighting is a partnership. We're in this fight together. As these schemes morph and develop and the fraudsters become even more bold, it's going to be that unified front which makes the difference in detecting, deterring, and ultimately defeating the crime. Giving our employers a toolkit, though, to ferret out what may be those possible red flags at the earliest stage of the claim will only further bolster our fraud-fighting partnership. Hence, we're talking about initial employer-level investigations. Recent story published by CNBC really highlighted the scope and scale of employee theft, employee fraud. The average company loss was estimated in that study to be in the range of about $1.2 million. And most notably, the small and mid-sized businesses were the ones found to be disproportionately impacted, with as much as 68% of the study's respondents reporting that they come from small and mid-sized businesses.
And that's a huge number. You know, as the daughter of a small business owner, I know how claims can affect the overall bottom line of your business. We don't want your businesses infiltrated with false claims. And thankfully, 80 to 90% of claims filed are valid. But for the ones that aren't, we're here to tell you that we care about your business and we care about preventing these claims from being filed and catching these claims when they are.
I agree with that 100%. I've been out to enough employers and having that personal background myself of small business owners, you know how much it does impact.
Yep.
So what we're going to cover today, there's really 6 critical elements of your initial investigation. What you're looking for is a sound initial investigation of that workplace injury. This might be something that you already do, but don't have any formal process surrounding. We believe that this is an essential prevention step. The R, the E, the P, and the O-R-T. It's an acronym that we've developed kind of to make it a little bit easier. Also, what we're going to be deploying is the first of its kind work comp report worksheet. So it's basically a supplement to your process to help you guide you through the steps. Currently, you're already asked by our claims department if you have any suspicions around the filing of the claim. Nothing, that's not going to change. They're still going to ask that of you. But what this tool and this training is intended to do is really to highlight very specific areas of concern that we in the industry would recognize as red flags. It's also great because it acts as some basic reminders for any specific evidence that you may want to look into. There's a section that talks about security camera footage. That's a great reminder to say, you know what, let me go ahead and check the security camera footage. Is there anything more that I should look into? Really what we want to do is we want to identify as many of these red flags as possible early on in the process. One red flag in and of itself does not necessarily mean that fraud is present. In fact, we need to prove every single one of these red flags up. We have to have the evidence to go along with it. But what we're looking for is a pattern of vagueness, lack of clarity, other red flags that might key us into, hey, this is something that we should dig into more than your standard claim. The vast majority of claims are wholly legitimate. As many as 80 to 90% are legitimate claims, wholly legitimate claims. This idea will also help you kind of work through that as well, so that you can rest assured no stone is being left unturned at this initial stage of the process.
I'm excited about this form. I don't know about you.
Agreed. So we're going to go over a lot of information today, pretty short amount of time. Presentations are going to be recorded first and foremost. So don't necessarily feel the need to take quick notes. We're going to have that all available for you. The first webinar in our series, as I mentioned, is up there as well. So I would take a look at that one. That's going to answer a lot of questions as well. But we've developed this report worksheet to really help you. It's a tool directly in your hands. It's going to act as your step-by-step guide to that initial employer investigation. First of its kind tool, like I said, broken up into the R, the E, the P, the O, R, and T sections. These are going to be the areas that you want to consider when trying to understand how this accident played out. On the right side of the form, on the left side of the form, you're going to have kind of the topics. On the right side of the form, it's going to be the various red flags. And as you make your way through the form, you're trying to kind of come up with that sum of the no's. How many times does it not make sense to you? How many times is it something that you just simply cannot explain, that there's not evidence out there to explain? Presentation is going to kind of follow a similar back and forth, where we're going to talk about a topic, and then we're going to talk about the red flags that you might see under that topic. Again, remember, this is a supplement to your current claim filing process. It may naturally be done in the days following the injury occurring, and then you're reporting it to our claims department. So, Lindsay, let's jump right in with the letter R in report. What should our customers do first and foremost?
Okay, so the first element of the report is R, respond. The first step for any employer, anytime a worker reports an injury, is to respond. Respond with care and sympathy and begin to collect information. Once an employee reports an injury to you or your management team, respond by gathering details on the who, the what, where, why, and how, and submit the claim to ICW Group, which can be done via phone, email, fax, or believe it or not, snail mail.
Sure.
Information on how to file this claim can be found at our policyholder website, icwgroup.com/PC. At that same website, you'll be able to find claims forms applicable to your own state. Every state has different forms for which to report a claim. For example, in California, the form is the DWC-1. Once you report the claim, you'll receive a claim number and the process begins.
So get that claim in first and foremost.
Exactly. Things to keep in mind when gathering details from your injured worker. Whether or not they can specify the date and time of the injury. These are all warning signs. If they can't specify the date and time of injury, why not? Any delay in reporting the injury, and no mention of the injury to you at all. If an injured worker cannot specify the date and time of the injury, this would be a great time to press for more details or ask for any witnesses who may have seen something who'd be able to pin down when the injury occurred. If the injury was reported days after it allegedly occurred, find out why. Injuries reported after a weekend would give rise to question if the injury actually occurred at work or over the weekend, playing soccer or, somewhere else. Lastly, if the injury was never reported by the employee and you get notice by way of a medical bill, or maybe it came initially from ICW, your first notice was from us because we received the claim first, you can still question the employee about this and gather whatever details they are willing to provide. All right, so the claim has now been reported and you've gathered basic details about the incident. Chris, what's next?
Next letter in the acronym report is E for employee. This is the next step in the process where you really start to dig into the details of the claimed injury. And it's going to surround the employee accounts. And that employee account is not limited to the worker alone. That's going to also be any witnesses that have possibly seen the accident can validate what is being said. As far as the injured worker, things that you're going to want to look into are full name, aliases, and nicknames. A lot of this information is probably in your personnel file, but it's a good opportunity to make sure that you have that information. Their contact info, is that updated? Do you have the most up-to-date phone number, address? Even email addresses, those are very valuable. Job titles and responsibilities, as well as that date of hire. All that information could be really helpful for us down the line. It may seem to be kind of mundane things to document at this point, but from an investigation standpoint, if it ultimately is something that we need to investigate on our side, having that information is very helpful. Also, witnesses, like I said, employees can extend to witnesses as well. So just as the police are going to check to see if there were any witnesses to, say, a car accident, you want to kind of do the same type of thing. Is there anybody else out there that can help you validate what happened? What you want to do as far as the report worksheet is really memorialize who they are and just a general idea of what they may have seen. So because we may need to interview them down the line, we're really looking to just identify them at this point in time. I mentioned security camera footage. Security camera footage is great. It's great. What you're trying to do is see, do I have a camera there? Did that camera, was it on at the time? Did it capture the incident? And because these systems will overwrite the footage, you want to make sure that you are preserving that evidence. So again, this is that reminder in the process, reminder in the worksheet. Say, oh yeah, I actually do have some security camera footage. You'd be surprised that we've had employers with real concerns. They had real concerns about the claim early on, but they forgot that, hey, I have security camera footage, or that they really didn't talk to any witnesses surrounding it. If they had done that, they might have avoided what ultimately came across to the employee as being questioned, being suspicious of this claim. And unfortunately, in those circumstances, what oftentimes can happen is, again, that employee is going to run to an attorney because they feel that they're not going to be helped. Check those sources first. The way that you're going to do it is in a sincere manner, that you're sincerely curious about, how did this happen? From an injury prevention standpoint, could we have avoided this better in the future? So it's not a grilling of the employee necessarily. It's not a grilling of witnesses. You really don't want to do that. What you want to do is gather information and explain to them that you are looking to make sure that, hey, this is an unfortunate thing. Let's see if we can avoid this in the future. So, some warning signs related to the injured worker in their account. What you're looking to determine is whether the worker's account actually makes sense. Does it sound immediately suspicious, or are they being overly vague? A red flag to us can be too much detail, too. What basically you're trying to gauge, since work injuries don't commonly occur, it should pretty much stand out to the worker how this played out, especially in the days following it. So that account should make sense to you. It should pass your sniff test. We mentioned their job title and responsibilities, knowing what you know about their specific work duties. Does this injury account even make sense? Now, this is a big piece of you as the employer's role in this process. You're the subject matter expert for your business. You know the tools that they're working with. You know the duties. You know the locations. So does this all make sense to you? I'll talk a little bit later about a story of how that was really the key on one of our prior cases of us identifying a fraudulent claim because something stuck out to the employer. Additionally, have you possibly seen this team of doctors and lawyers come across in the past? If you have an early doctor report, bill, if you have that attorney letter of representation, is this something that either you've seen the employee work with this group in the past, or you've had prior workers, other employees work with this team in the past? Some additional warning signs. Pre-existing conditions. So this is not to say that the worker has a pre-existing condition that was aggravated by working. That happens. That becomes a work comp claim with some defenses in place, but that's not what we're talking about here. What you're really trying to gauge is whether this happened in the past, that this specific injury happened in the past, that say that they had mentioned this happened over the weekend. That now being filed as a work comp claim, could it be that they're trying to get around a high deductible, co-pays, these types of things that would be through their personal health insurance, and now they're thinking, okay, I'm going to present it as a work comp claim with the idea that I won't have to pay those types of things. We want to make note of those things, absolutely. Any pending disciplinary action, that could also be a red flag. Are they really attempting to sneak in an injury claim right before they're possibly being fired? If the employee never mentioned the injury, that could also be a red flag. Again, one would expect this type of thing to come up, especially if it's an injury that's moderate, certainly severe that's being claimed. You would think that this would come up. If you know that the worker is generally open about other things in their life and this doesn't come up, you want to make note about that. Now, this is a spot to double check with their line level supervisors. What you want to make sure is that there wasn't even possibly a vague reference to it. So we have had those scenarios where the line level supervisor, the worker mentioned to him, hey, I'm feeling this twinge in my back. And it was kind of dismissed, or the line level supervisor didn't realize, listen, that could be the trigger for them possibly needing some work comp treatment, a work comp claim being open. So if the person reporting the claim has not heard of this, say that they are the point of contact in human resources to get the claim forms into us. If they're asking themselves, well, did I know about this? Well, the answer would naturally be no. You got to make sure to go to their line level supervisor or whoever they would most likely mention this type of thing to see, hey, was there any reference to it? Again, it could save a lot of time and a lot of grief over suspicions that may not necessarily be merited. What you're also looking for is along the lines of the disciplinary actions. Are there any pending layoffs? Is workload being reduced? Are you going to have some layoffs? If claims are being filed just before then, that could certainly be a red flag. Now, witnesses. Well, you'd expect witnesses to be independent. Not necessarily. These red flags can also extend to the witnesses. In general, if there are no witnesses, that could be a red flag, especially if there should have been witnesses. So the lack of witnesses, say that that the worker has staged an accident while everybody went off to lunch. Want to note that could be a red flag. If the only witnesses that are coming forward are related to the employee, that could be a red flag, right? That they're trying to support that this claim is being filed, especially if you would ask them beforehand. That's the idea of a late statement. If you've asked around, has anybody seen this? And then all of a sudden people are coming out saying, oh yeah, I forgot, I did see it. Again, that's unlikely. Either you did or you didn't. What you're looking for is conflicting stories too. If the worker is somehow trying to collude with witnesses, their stories, when you really get into the details of what happened, where was it, how did this all play out, those stories could start to conflict. That's something that you want to absolutely make note of. So now we've delved into the things to consider surrounding the employee and those various employee accounts that might be available to verify this incident. Lindsay, what should we look for regarding the place where the injury occurred?
Well, we want to consider where the injury occurred. Most workers engage in duties specific to their expertise, right? They require them to be in certain areas of the workplace most of the time. So once the incident is reported, ask yourself if this employee has a reason to be in that area. Is this his normal location? Is it supervised, or are there any workers that could corroborate his being there? And again, as we talked about, what about surveillance? Look around for the cameras in the area that may have captured the incident. Surveillance cameras are a great investment for any business, especially when it comes to workers' comp. They can validate a legitimate claim or support that the injury was entirely fabricated. We've had employers submit video to us that has helped mitigate claims and even prompted referrals to law enforcement because the videos show the employee was never in the area where he said he was. Also, if workers know they are under surveillance, there's a less likely chance that they will fake a slip and fall.
Yeah, great prevention strategy.
Yeah. Some red flags to consider. If the worker is in an area where he normally wouldn't be or have a reason to be, was he passing through on the way to the parking lot? Was he visiting a friend? There may be reasons for his being in that area, so just ask questions. Consider if their area has no surveillance, no supervision rather. Is it possible this employee knew that no one would be in that area and found this as an opportunity to stage a fall? Or if the injury occurred where there are no surveillance cameras around, or in an area where he knew surveillance wouldn't capture him, like in a storage closet or behind a machine. Mm-hmm. These are all valid concerns to consider and questions to ask yourself when investigating this injury. Okay, so let's recap. We have responded to the employee and reported the claim to ICW. We've gathered details from the employee and determined if there's any witnesses or surveillance cameras. And we've also determined where the injury occurred. Chris, next step.
Next step. Obtain. That's where you're obtaining that full account of the injury incident, where you're really trying to piece everything together and whether it makes sense to you. You should be able to essentially envision exactly what played out. You should be able to picture it in your head. So different from concerns that the worker didn't do what they may have been trained to do and as a result injured themselves. That's kind of from a safety perspective. You're seeking to determine whether the full account of what happened makes sense, whether what's been explained to you, whether the evidence out there, if it all makes sense to you. Now, if there are any remaining gaps, this is the place that it's going to materialize. And it's going to naturally lead you to asking that next clarifying question. The key to employer's initial investigation, whether you're using this report worksheet, report approach or not, is just, again, to approach that entire matter with sympathy and a sincere desire to learn what happened so it can basically better be avoided in the future. Approaching it in this way is naturally going to lead you to ask follow-up questions, ask these clarifying questions. If a worker comes up to you and says, hey, I injured myself as a result of carrying a box, well, it would naturally make sense to say, well, were you lifting the box? Were you carrying the box? Did you put it over your head? How much did it weigh? Did you have to put it down? Did someone help you out with this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So you're working through all of these types of things naturally because you want to understand how this played out. And again, you're trying to determine, is there something there that I can do to help in the future? Again, we're not grilling the employee at this point. We're just asking these natural follow-up questions. Be curious, avoid coming across as suspicious, even if you're going through and you're documenting your concerns. You're working through this, and you're saying, yep, that's a red flag, that's a red flag. Make sure that you don't come across as suspicious. Let us do that. If there is some problem in the employee's account, let us be the one to have to confront them with this, because you again don't want to create the situation where the employee is somehow trying to get back at now their employer for not appropriately treating them how they felt they wanted to be treated. Again, 80 to 90% of claims are legit, so it's a good idea to do that. So the obtain section. This is where you're, again, piecing that all together. You're comparing against those additional evidence areas. Check that security camera footage. Is it available? Does it validate that the worker claim happened? If it's clear that this was in fact an accident, does it appear that this wasn't something that was staged? That's important to kind of gauge that at this point. Does it appear that safety protocols were followed? Again, this is not to say that something may not ultimately be learned from it. That, hey, this was a safety protocol that we did have in place and they didn't follow it, and as a result, the person got injured. Or, hey, we do need a new safety protocol because we didn't really think that somebody could be injured in this way. But does it sound like the worker was generally doing what you would expect someone reasonable to do? Does it not appear that they tried to hurt themselves, that they did not intentionally try to hurt themselves? And that's abnormal, but that's what you're trying to gauge as far as safety protocols being followed. In the event that they were working with a machine, is there any concerns about that machine's involvement in the story? That's what you're really trying to gauge here. Additional signs that you're looking for. Is this the first time this type of incident has been reported, this type of injury is being reported? If you're seeing a string of claims come across where workers are claiming the exact same thing, does that seem suspicious? Now, you could have scenarios where workers do similar activities. So if they're working on an assembly line and we're working with their hands and wrists, could you see a line of hand and wrist injuries? Sure. But you're trying to gauge whether, hey, this is kind of a unique injury that they're reporting for what they do. And I've seen this a couple times. So you're looking about that. Another big one that's a positive sign is whether the employee is asking about returning to work, our RTW return to work program. Are they interested in getting back to work, getting back on their feet? And this is their identity. This is what they do. And most workers will be trying to figure out, how do I get better? How do I get back to work? So if you're seeing that, that's a really good sign.
Well, I was going to say, most people want to return to work, right? I mean, they need to earn money to provide for themselves and their families.
Absolutely.
So that's the natural inclination.
Absolutely. So that's what you're looking for, right? Go back to work. Sure. So you're less likely to be concerned that they're looking to present a fraudulent claim at that point. You know, the scenario that should be the most concerning is when you have really an early exaggeration of what they cannot and cannot do. You've got these gaps in the story, and frankly, you're going to see attorneys often at those early stages, because could they be then gearing more for settlement versus getting some medical treatment and getting back to work? It's not a big moneymaker for them. So if you're not seeing the attorney up front and it generally tends to check out, you're probably doing good. People are social creatures. So if you don't have employee rumors and suspicions, again, they're talking to each other. So if the employees that are arguably most impacted by them are not necessarily concerned by them going out on a work injury, because they would have to carry that additional burden of workload because the injured worker's out. If they don't really have any concerns, that's a really good sign up front. Now, some warning signs. So unsafe, blatantly unsafe use of machines. We had an investigation where a worker claimed that he slipped and fell on some oil. The reason that the oil was on the ground was because he was changing the oil on the machine. On face value, this appeared legitimate. He was the shop mechanic. So as the employer was doing their initial investigation, they asked for a little bit of clarification. The simple thing that they asked about was, well, was the manufacturing line disrupted by this? Did you essentially have to stop anything? The answer was no, it did not. What this told them is that the machine was still running. The machine was never turned off. So what his account was then was that he changed the oil, hence some spilled on the floor, on a machine that was still running. And they knew that you would not do that. They knew that he absolutely knew that you would not do this. You'd shut the machine down. So that became the trigger for them to say, something seems suspicious. At that point, they said, let's go ahead and check the security camera tape. Before that, they had not necessarily considered checking the security camera tape. And in fact, when they looked at the security camera tape, they saw that he had totally staged this fall. So in short order, we are notified. Our fraud investigations team notified. We go out, obtain the evidence, we preserve that video evidence, we speak to witnesses, and we speak to the injured worker. We obtain a recorded statement from the injured worker, really giving the worker the opportunity to wholly explain what they're saying happened, knowing that we have the security camera footage. Well, as you might expect, we end up confronting the worker saying, hey, we do have evidence of you staging this fall. It's clear as day. And the outcome was that the claim was dismissed and that the worker was quickly prosecuted for this. This is a perfect scenario. It's a perfect scenario how the subject matter expertise of the employer at the location really helped to key us into, well, this is a case that we need to jump on immediately. And they did a great job of working with us in that process. So really a good outcome. They're not always as straightforward. I wish they were, but I wanted to bring it up because it shows you that nice interaction between the employer level investigation and then the fraud investigation that our team does. Additional warning signs could be questionable mechanism of injury. Does the body part that they're reporting just not make sense as far as their accident account? Hey, I tweaked my knee, but I was lifting something over my head. And you want to make note of those types of things. We mentioned similar reports by others. That's where you're kind of looking for that very template complaints. Here's what I can and cannot do. It could be that you have somebody that's really driving that, a single individual that's driving that, somebody from an attorney firm, something along those lines that you might be picking up on. And you see it after a couple claims. You see that behavior. If your employer is not necessarily asking about returning to work, as we mentioned, they typically do. So if they seem to be avoiding that topic altogether, that could be something that's certainly a red flag, and you want to document that. The other employees, again, they know that this person best. So if they're reporting suspicions, you definitely want to make sure that you're listening to them on theirs. Their gut's telling them something's not right. So listen into that, key into those people. What are they generally saying, and document their information so that we can follow up with them. Coworkers are going to see things on social media in the same way. People do still post information about the other job that they have across town, not realizing that, hey, this is going to go public to anybody that's their friend. That ends up being very valuable to us because, but for that thread of information, we may not have that next good insight on where should we conduct some type of surveillance. So that's going to be something that you definitely do want to keep an ear out for through the life of the claim, really, because that's when those types of things materialize. Now, it's not uncommon for those coworkers, those witnesses to have some hesitancy about this, to have some hesitancy about getting involved. Hey, it's not my thing. I don't want to get involved. Really, the point needs to be made to them is that this directly impacts them. It's a culture thing that, hey, we won't, as an employer, tolerate fraud here. We have anti-fraud materials that we can offer to you that specifically target getting this information out to employees, sending this message to the employees. And on there is our fraud hotline, 855-ICW-FRAUD. They can call us anonymously. It goes directly to us. We just need these threads of information. It's been very successful in the past of those types of things. On a side note, keep an eye out for additional videos in this series that are really going to look to present this case to the employer. So you're going to have that available for, employee onboarding, embed kind of in your safety prevention meetings. So that'll be a little bit later in 2018. So lastly, any rumors that you're hearing about employees trying to file similar claims, really, if you're hearing those, again, you might have some level of organization. It's not a single worker that's trying to present this fraudulent claim. It's a group of workers, and that group of workers usually has a lead, a head that's kind of guiding them. If you're picking up on any of that, reach out to my department immediately, because what we want to do is we want to mobilize my team, come up with some strategies to start to mitigate that from a prevention standpoint. And really, it's going to be around the awareness of work comp fraud. It's not going to be tolerated, and we're going to pursue investigation on these. So I mentioned our fraud hotline, again, 855 ICW fraud, prominently displayed on the anti-fraud posters. There's a very simple message on that poster as well. It's talking about work comp fraud, and what it says is don't do it, don't tolerate it, and report it. So similarly, the REPORT acronym naturally leads us to the question of what an employer should do if they conduct this thorough initial investigation and they see some real issues. Essentially, if they see something, how do they say something?
Well, if you see something, say something. Report it. So you've reported the claim to ICW via the first notice of loss, and if you choose to fill out the report worksheet that we've been discussing, and things are just not adding up, please report your concerns to the claims examiner to memorialize them in the claim, and also notify us, your SIU partners.
Sure. So, Lindsay, so how does this report worksheet play into the current claim filing process?
Okay, so if the employee comes to you with an injury and needs immediate medical attention, get them to the appropriate medical clinic and worry about paperwork later. Getting them the treatment they need is your first priority. If, however, treatment isn't required immediately, fill out the appropriate claim forms discussed earlier and contact First Notice of Loss to report the claim. Once that ball is rolling, start working on the report form if you so choose.
So is the completion of this report worksheet, is that required on all claims?
It's not required on any claims, quite frankly. It should be considered entirely supplemental to any state forms required of you and your reporting to First Notice of Loss.
So if I have no real suspicions regarding the claim, I don't need to complete it at all?
Honestly, it's up to you guys. It's up to you guys out there. It's up to them. I'd say if you witness the incident and you have no real concerns, there'd be no need. But at the same time, I'm a huge fan of getting information up front while the incident is fresh. So even if the injury isn't being questioned, it's never a bad idea to secure possible witnesses and preserve any available surveillance.
I think what naturally starts to happen too is as you get used to approaching it in this way, it becomes more second nature to you. So I agree with you that using that quality approach of information gathering upfront, first couple of days of filing a claim, it doesn't hurt even on those claims where, hey, it appears legitimate. It's really the ones where this is especially suspicious that I think that you really need to dig in. Right?
Oh, for sure. The more information gathered ultimately from the employer is going to give ICW the best opportunity to help the injured worker and just keep the process moving fluidly. Also, just because there may not be concerns now doesn't mean there won't be later on.
Sure.
Any information obtained in this report is going to be valuable.
So what about workers already represented by an attorney? Can employers still complete all the other steps of the initial investigation, like checking for witnesses, looking into security cameras, working kind of through what they know the injured worker is reporting as far as what happened, what injuries he sustained, and then the employer's trying to envision that, kind of piecing that together?
Oh, of course. Don't let the attorney, freak you out. Surveillance can still be reviewed and witnesses can and should still be contacted. We don't want you obtaining full statements from these people. That's something that we're going to handle. But it is helpful when names can be provided and surveillance can be preserved for our retrieval. Ultimately, the attorney will be assisting the employee in filing necessary paperwork and asking questions about the incident, but any personnel files should be reviewed on your end, which may offer details that could be added to this report.
Yep.
Real quick, this is a great time to reiterate that we do have this fraud hotline available to all customers anytime that fraud concerns pop up. And once you give us a call, we'll work with you in explaining how we can defend these suspicions and work toward resolving them. Chris, why don't you elaborate on how we work with our customers?
Okay, so the last letter in the acronym REPORT is team. So this represents your partnership with ICW Group in this fraud fight. ICW Group is your fraud prevention partner. We're in this together, meaning you are not in it alone. So we have a dedicated team of fraud investigators that are going to be your fraud advocate in this fight. We do all the heavy lifting. Really, that unified defense that I mentioned early on, that starts as soon as the employer reports the injury, is really the ideal prevention strategy. You're asking good questions up front, and it's not not seen as a crime of opportunity, frankly. Work comp fraud is a crime of opportunity. So if the employee knows that their account's going to be appropriately scrutinized, they're going to be less likely to take the opportunity to take a couple extra days off of work. Hey, it's being questioned. If, however, we're up against an employee that's just dead set on pursuing a fraudulent claim, that's where our expert team of fraud investigators is mobilized. Our team coordinates the entire formal investigation, the full fraud investigation. So that's going to be from statements to surveillance to background checks to social media checks. We do that all. You're essentially that initial watchman that you're looking for, those little nuggets that really can key us into knowing, hey, there's something going on here, and frankly give us that good insight of what evidence is there. So if the evidence my team gathers is clear, it's compelling, we package that case for presentation to law enforcement partners so that they consider possible prosecution. All the while, our claims department is going to be strategizing on the defense avenues for that claim. Red flag identification is the very first step, but it's going to lead to, okay, what evidence is out there? Let's see if we can dig into that evidence. Again, a team in partnership with you to defend against those who may be willing to engage in this fraudulent behavior and frankly attempt to steal from both of us. So our approach to fraud defense does not rest as a single layer. As a team, we developed what we call AIM. It's a proprietary data platform, really leveraging data to identify the more complex criminal fraud schemes deeper and quicker than ever before. It's really this technology that has allowed our elite team of provider fraud investigators to not only work these injury claims from the workers, but also the doctors and attorneys that the workers may team up with. And frankly, that can really inflate these claims. This helps us really, this tool helps us and the approach helps us to better level the playing field against what are really sophisticated players in the fraud world. Often, it's operating behind the scenes and awareness of many of our policyholders, but I can tell you that many claims have been mitigated. Many claims have been altogether avoided based on our ability to investigate both the symptom, the workers' claims, as well as the disease, the organized criminal schemes, the doctors and lawyers that really inflate these things.
In addition to that AIM technology, every claim is reviewed for fraud within 24 hours of receipt of that claim. All claims are swept through a database that can identify over 3,000 possible red flags on any given claim. That's a lot of red flags.
Wow.
If a claim is flagged, the system is going to notify both the claims examiner and the SIU team for review. This database makes multiple checks for new red flags throughout the life of the claim, so it doesn't just stop when we first report the claim. Once a claim is assigned, every claim is investigated internally by claims examiners that my SIU team has trained in this area. When claims are referred out for field investigations, my team personally reviews every claim that comes back with positive surveillance or red flags identified during an investigation. As we will soon point out, we conduct a lot of investigations, 7 times the industry average, or 7 times the industry average to be exact. Finally, as Chris mentioned earlier, if we've determined that fraud may have occurred, SIU will refer the case out to law enforcement for investigation and prosecution. Just a quick fun mathematical fact. Last year, we identified over 116,000 red flags, which is nearly 1 red flag per business minute.
Yeah, that was cool to see that. So what does all this result in? Right? Very short time frame, we've deployed over 6,000 cases for investigation. And as Lindsay mentioned, that breaks down to 7 times the industry average of cases assigned for investigation. We will investigate when the red flags are present. And again, this initial investigation helps us to kind of identify those and substantiate these types of things. This includes 30,000 hours of surveillance, which is a really useful tool when we appropriately time it out, and that's where we help out and strategize on when to use it. It's a really useful tool. So there's a lot of surveillance that's going on. This has all resulted in over 136 individuals being charged, over 1,200 criminal counts, and 13 criminal organizations, these complex criminal groups being disrupted. So again, what does this all mean? How did this play back into our customers? It's resulted in over $60 million in reduced claim costs. We think that's pretty conservative for our policyholders. It's a big number, and I can tell you that more is on the horizon. So I refer to our approach as consisting of multiple levels, multiple layers, which frankly training our employers regarding this initial level of investigation, this very initial phase, is now one more layer in that fight. Really, we want to hit all of the types of things that we can look into, and whether it be an old school field investigation or cutting edge technologies and tools, we're really constantly evolving to match the creativity of a new generation of fraudsters. So we're leveling again the playing field. So, in summary, number one priority is always going to be ensuring that the injured worker receive the medical care and information that they need. Remember, 80 to 90% of the claims are legitimate. So this starts by reporting that claim to ICW Group's claims department. If immediate medical attention is required, by all means, seek that. Your initial investigation, and therefore this approach, is intended to act as that supplement to your standard claim reporting process. And again, it may naturally be done in those days following that initial claim report, but it's going to serve as that better guide to the identification of these possible red flags, as well as the assurance that as you're working through these, okay, we do have evidence to validate that initial suspicion, those types of things. We know that these types of suspicions can weigh heavily upon your mind, and it's really in the form of this simple, but we believe powerful worksheet and approach that we hope you find that peace of mind that no initial stone is being left unturned, and really that we are in this together, that let's go ahead and look into these things and see what's available. So, Lindsay, go ahead and tell us more about how attendees can obtain a copy of this report worksheet, as well as additional resources that are currently available for them.
In the next few days, all attendees of this presentation will be receiving an email link giving you direct access to this form. You will always want to report the claim first to first notice of loss. And if you choose to fill out the form, if the no's don't add up or there are just a significant amount of them, report it. It's important to note that any red flags identified at this point may not constitute fraud per se or suggest that fraud has occurred, but they are worth documenting. My team will take the opportunity to go over with you your concerns you've identified in the report form. If at that time there may not be enough evidence to pursue an investigation on our end, does not mean that an investigation won't be warranted in the future, should other concerns arise. All the information on this report is of value and may certainly assist in any investigation later on.
Really a timing thing too on when the investigation is done. That's where we'll help out.
Yep, definitely. The policyholder website is something that I mentioned when we first started. This is where you will access information on how to report claims, report payroll, and obtain any state-specific forms. Also, you'll be able to access this webinar as well as other anti-fraud related materials at icwgroup.com/PC. These are some examples of collateral, posters, and other materials that you can place at your business that may help deter employees from filing false claims.
We've had some really good success with those, and those are the posters that I mentioned that have our fraud hotline, that have this messaging, that have this imagery that's really intended to make sure that employees understand the impact of work comp fraud. So to really kind of drive it home, we do believe that fraud fighting is a partnership, and we know you're keenly interested in it based on the great attendance and response that we received to our first Fraud Spot It, Stop It video in the series, and then to this one as well. We're really encouraged by this, and it really drives my team of dedicated fraud investigators embedded within ICW Group to continue to be your advocate in this fight. The best way to avoid a fraudulent claim is to avoid the injury in the first place. That's always going to be the case. Prevention is the key. So continue to look at your safety measures that you have in place. Continue to look at your safety protocols. Again, be that subject matter expert for your business. Do you tend to have more injuries during a time of year? That should then kind of ask you that asking that next clarifying question. Well, why is that? Is there a driver to that? What you immediately know is that, hey, if we are talking safety, I need to double down during that time, right? In that lead up to that time of year, I need to double down because there's something unique about my industry, my business, my employees that's causing a spike in that. That's something you want to look into. And our risk management department is here to help with all of that, to strategize with you, to come up with solutions on, well, what might we be able to do to just be a little bit more safer? This is a great time to get in the anti-fraud messaging as well. And usually the way that employers are going to do it and really turn around that culture is to start to explain the impact. How does it impact them? How does a bad work comp claim impact the individual worker? And why should the individual worker help out? Why should they be a witness? Why should they not be the one to extend their claim? Because, hey, guys, it's going to take this many more units produced of whatever we produce to pay for that. Most workers don't get the scale of work comp insurance. So to the extent that you're comfortable having these conversations with them, this is a really good way to do that. So, this idea, getting this into your hands, it's again towards that culture and that partnership that we have with you. So in furtherance of this partnership, as Lindsay mentioned, don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions that you might have, or as fraud concerns come up down the line, you can reach out to us. You now have our direct line. That's for our policyholders. Certainly possible future topics of interest. I'm going to get the ICW fraud at icwgroup.com email address. It's perfect for that. Hey, I'd like to learn more about that. So in addition to the questions that you may have submitted in the question pane on the webinar, if there's any after the fact, go ahead and submit it through the email address, and we'll get back to you on those. And keep an eye out for that report worksheet over the next couple of days following this live broadcast. Thereafter, we're going to go ahead and put it on our website as well, so it's going to be accessible there. So as I mentioned, the webinar broadcast is going to be made available in a couple days. You're encouraged to listen to our first one as well. That hits a lot of topics that you probably do have questions on. So it's about the same time frame. When you have a chance, go ahead and listen to it. Certainly, if there's anybody else at your location that you think would benefit from this information, having it online on demand, then they can also take a listen to it. We'd like as many people as possible to hear our message. There's also going to be a ton of additional resources on there surrounding safety, surrounding fraud, so keep an eye out on those. And again, I want to reiterate my appreciation for your valuable time today and really the opportunity to speak to you regarding this topic. We hope that you now feel a little bit better equipped to spot work comp fraud so that we can work together to really stop it. Be safe and take care.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time, guys.
Thanks again.
Thank you.